Hey guys, Chris here. Today we have 3 stories of people in the outdoors having very frightening encounters. The first one is a fly fisherman up in Montana. The second one is a snowmobiler near Truckee, California. And the third one are some campers in Pennsylvania. That's next. Okay, so for today's beer, we have the Sierra Nevada Summerfest refreshing summer lager. Not lager like a lumberjack, but a lager like a beer. And that is my way to kick off summer here with a refreshing beer. And I am in the Sierra Nevada this evening. I am in some very thick cover here near the cedar grove. I got a couple nice cedar trees behind me here, and it's just the way I like it. I got a nice little stream right over here and having a good time. I love summer, so cheers. Summerfest. Yeah, gotta love the Sierra Nevada. So our story takes place in Montana, 1982. Young man named Brad, he was a fly fisherman. I used to live in Montana, 17 years up there. Loved it. A lot of national forest, got Yellowstone to the south, Glacier National Park in the north. Great country. Brad liked to fish the upper Missouri River. He was from the Helena area. The upper Missouri is a really interesting country. The Missouri is a very large river, starts in Montana, flows north around into North Dakota, works its way down into Missouri, Mississippi, ends up in the Gulf of Mexico. But the upper headwaters, which are the Gallatin, Madison, and Jefferson River, 3 rivers come together and form the headwaters of the Missouri River. It's called Three Forks right there. There's even a state park. Used to go there all the time. Just north of there is a dam called Hauser Dam. Got a dams up the river, makes it nice and deep. Really good fishing, fly fishing. Brad would park his car on the west side of the river, go across the top of the bridge, come down the east side, and this particular night he came down about 3/4 of a mile down the east side. Fished well into the evening, and that's when the bugs are really good and the fishing can be really good, and he fished after dark. So Brad was fishing that evening. He was actually doing really well. He was starting to catch fish. Caught his first rainbow, nice sized fish, 2 to 3 pounds. Walked it back to this boulder that he had his backpack on, and he built a small pool with rocks in a circle right next to the river's edge to put the fish in, preserve it. Went back up, just continued to fish. Caught 3 more fish, kept bringing them back and putting them in this pool to preserve them. He continued to fish and have success, and he caught 3 more fish, all in this 2 to 3 pound range. Really nice. Put them in this pool, heads back up another time, casts out, and it's getting dark. It's well after dark. Casting upstream, and then he just lets it float down, and he waits for the fish to bump it. He doesn't even really have to see it. He's just going by feel. He hooks one, and it breaks him off, and now he lost his fly. So he went back to this boulder where his backpack was, and he had a flashlight in there as well, and his fly box was in there. As he was approaching this boulder, at the base of the boulder and then kind of around the side, he saw this movement, just faintly in the dark, but there was dark, kind of a shape move around this boulder away from him. Startled him, but he needed to get to his backpack to get his flashlight and see what the heck was going on. So he goes to the boulder, the top of the boulder, unzips the pack, pulls out this old Rayovac with the big spotlight on it, and he aims it up, and right then he hears some crackling in the forest just downstream from him. So Brad aims the flashlight in the direction of the sound, and he sees just 10 feet away from him, moving downstream, this hairy bipedal creature. It was huge. Long dark hair, no neck, 7 to 8 feet tall. He guessed 400 to 500 pounds. He couldn't see its face because it had its back turned, and it was moving rapidly downstream and up this slope. He said he saw it for about 7 to 8 seconds. Brad said this thing had these long, powerful strides and these long arms swinging as it moved rapidly up this steep embankment as it disappeared into the night. He stood there stunned in silence, just kind of trying to understand what he had just seen. And he said it was the strangest thing because he didn't feel any fear, at least in that moment. Because whatever this was, his brain tried to rationalize that it was, well, it's an animal, it's clearly moving away, and it seems to be afraid of my light. But that all changed when he shined the light towards the rock pool where he kept his fish. He looked down at the river's edge and he saw there was only 2 trout now. And his first thought was, okay, some animal was coming upriver foraging and it had an easy meal when it found 2 trout. And then he had this thought that whatever this was got the 2 trout, but what if it comes back for the other 2 trout? So right then he thought, I gotta get out of here. Brad quickly packed up his gear, put it in his backpack, broke his fly rod down, grabbed the 2 fish that he did catch, and turned and was going to head upstream. And right then he heard coming off behind him downstream and up the embankment a large boulder come rolling down the slope and go into the Missouri River with a loud splash. Just startled him, and he was relieved that it was at least behind him, and where he had to go was upstream and not downstream. He quickly went as fast as he could, the 3/4 of a mile in darkness to the dam, crossed the top of the dam. He didn't hear anything else downstream, got to his vehicle and drove home. Really scary. This was all in darkness after nightfall. He said he went back the next day to look for footprints. Daytime, summer. Didn't see anything. There was too many boulders and rocks. There was nothing to see. Over the years, he only told his wife and a couple of close friends. But he always remembered when it gets close to darkness, that's kind of the time to quit fly fishing if you're smart. So that is story number 1. So this next story takes place in 1987 near Truckee, California, just north of me here. And Truckee, California is on the way up to Donner Pass in the Sierra. This is from one of our viewers. His name was John, and he was snowmobiling with a friend south of Truckee, somewhere between Truckee and Squaw Valley. His friend had a snowmobile. He was riding on the back of the snowmobile. They're going through the forest, just having a great time. And at one point, while he's on the back of the snowmobile, his friend's driving, John felt something hit his back. He didn't think much of it. He thought maybe something in the, a branch hit him or something. He didn't really think much of it. And at one point, John's friend turned the snowmobile around and came back to that area. And John didn't know what he was doing. He turns off the snowmobile, and they look and they see in the snow these 18-inch long footprints, human-like footprints. And he said the stride was 4 to 5 feet long in between the footprints. And the footprints went right across the snowmobile trail that they had made just earlier. And John realized that was the exact spot where he felt something hit his back. Right in that moment, they both simultaneously felt this really intense fear because they realized whatever had made those tracks had walked right by them when they were snowmobiling. Just crazy. John said he didn't feel like he was being watched, but they had this really intense fear, and they got on that snowmobile and got out of there. John also mentioned that his friend had 2 huskies, and about a week earlier, his friend at night let the huskies out the back door to do their business, and he's in the national forest with his backyard, and these huskies went off into the forest, and he could hear them barking at something, barking really loud at something. And then at one point, I don't know exactly what happened, but the barking stopped, and he never saw these dogs again. They just disappeared. Crazy. I don't know all the details, but wow, very scary. That is story number 2. So this third story comes to us from one of our viewers. His name is Scott. He's from Pennsylvania. Sent me an email, and he had a pretty interesting story. I did not get a date on this when this happened, but he said this was kind of back in the day when he would take his 4-wheel drive truck, him and his friend, and they would go 4-wheeling on these back roads and trails in the forests of Pennsylvania. This one particular time, he had his wife with him, his wife at the time, and his friend, John, had his girlfriend. And they're driving along on this 4-wheel drive road, and they came upon this spot that had a stream, and it was going to a pond. They found out that the pond was a private pond, and so they thought it'd be a great place to camp, so they figured out who owned it. They got permission from this elderly couple. Turns out this couple, according to Scott, was pretty superstitious, is what he said. And the older gentleman said, you can camp there, just don't camp near the swamp because there's a Bigfoot that lives back there. Wow. And Scott didn't think too much of it, kind of took it with a grain of salt, didn't really think too much about Bigfoot or not, whether he believed or not. He just never really thought about it, but he wasn't too concerned. So they proceeded to set up their camp, do a little fishing. They caught a couple of bass out of the pond, having a really nice time, and they made some dinner, had a real good time with the couple, campfire, the whole thing. And a little bit later that evening, Scott heard in the forest behind the tent this growl. And then he thought he heard this kind of a chatter, talking gibberish. Like the Sierra sounds is what he said. It's kind of like the Sierra sound. Wasn't exactly that. He told his girlfriend, and she didn't really believe him. She didn't hear it. And he said, well, I understand you didn't hear it, but I'm going to get the 12-gauge shotgun out of the truck just in case we need it. And she was like, okay, whatever you think, but I don't think it's necessary. Also, at one point earlier in that afternoon, in the pond, just out of their view, they heard, it sounded like, at least to Scott, like somebody threw a large rock into the pond. Scott's friend thought it was maybe a fish jumping, so they didn't think too much about it. So they wrapped up their camp for the night, put the campfire out. Both couples went to their separate tents, these really good sized tents, went to bed, fell asleep. About an hour or so later, Scott and his wife heard in the other tent screaming. And it was Scott's friend's girlfriend screaming. And she said something moved at the top of the tent, like a hand went across the top of the tent. And this tent was 8 to 9 feet tall. And they could clearly see a hand touch it and kind of move across the top of the tent. Right then, Scott and his wife unzipped the sleeping bags, unzipped the tent, and they heard something crashing through the forest, moving away from them, and then this splash in the pond near the swamp. They got out and they could all smell this kind of a wet dog, skunkish, really powerful smell lingering in the air. And they were just all kind of freaked out by what the heck just happened. And they had the flashlights going and they're all half groggy and trying to wake up and got the adrenaline kicking in. And they looked and they shined the flashlight to the top of the tent and they saw, it looked like some mud on the top of the tent, like whatever it was rubbed the top of the tent with its hand. They could see mud. So Scott said to the girls, we're going to stay up and keep the fire going. You guys go to sleep and I'll sit here with the shotgun and we're going to kind of watch guard for the rest of the night. They sat up all night, didn't hear anything else, didn't see anything. The smell eventually went away. Finally, the sun was coming up, and then the girls kind of relieved them and then said, okay, you guys go lay down for a couple hours and get some rest. Pretty busy night for them. So when they got up, they did look for footprints, didn't find any. They decided to spend another night there. Not sure why. I could talk to Scott, maybe we can talk to him about it. They spent another night, and he said, while they were camping, at some point during the night, they had a campfire, and a couple rocks came out of the forest into their camp. He said he also heard some more of this samurai chatter, gibberish, talking like animal talking in the forest that night, as well as at one point they heard a howl. The next morning they were done camping, they packed up and got out of there, but they still wanted to camp, so they went to another campground, a more, Scott called it a legit campground. They're talking to the guy that's checking them in, and they told him what they heard and experienced a couple nights before. And he said, yep, many people in this area have heard this and even seen this. And that's all he said. Wow. So that is our third story for tonight. And I got to pack up and get out of here before it gets dark here. I love these giant cedar trees. Aren't they awesome? And they love these streams, so they just sit right next to them. Their roots must go right down there. So 100,000 people, I think, just subscribed to my channel today, which is Sunday. I'm filming this 2 days earlier, just to let you know. And that's pretty exciting. I really want to thank you guys for watching my channel. And we're going to do a 100K special coming up here. That'll be a lot of fun. I appreciate all the comments and everything else. If you guys do like stories about the strange, unexplained, and things that go bump in the night, you guys know what to do. Like and subscribe and all that fun. And I really appreciate you guys, as always. So thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Keep hiking.